So this is Business Communication Chapter 1, Understanding the Foundations of Business Communication. Chapter 1 talks about professional communication in a digital, social, mobile world. That's part of the reason that we have the classes in social media, okay? Because that's where we're getting to. And after COVID, we were actually very lucky that we were able to really be able to have some sort of platform where we could deliver instruction. And there was a lot of people that, since everything was shut down, they could take classes. So it was absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to go through the chapter, and we're just going to go through it just like if it was regular lecture and in class, okay? So you have your learning objectives. As you're studying this chapter, you will be able to explain the importance of effective communication to your career and your companies where you will work. Explain what it means to communicate as a professional in a business context. Describe the communication process model and the way social media are changing the nature of the business communication, and then outline the challenges and opportunities of mobile communication in business. List 4 general guidelines in using communication technology effectively, and then define ethics. Explain the difference between an ethical dilemma and an ethical lapse, and the 6 guidelines for making ethical communication choices. So understanding why communication matters. Communication is the key to everything, okay? It's a process of transferring information, meaning between senders and receivers. The problem is that sometimes when we send communication, whoever is speaking or sending through social media or text or whatever, sometimes maybe the message isn't appropriate, or it's not correct, or it's not understandable, or it's kind of convoluted and it's not a clear message. The other thing can be that maybe it is a clear message, but then the receiver, the recipient, right, whether it be someone receiving the text, a phone call, an email, or like you all right now are a receiver, right, of my communication, maybe they're not in a state where they're hearing appropriately, right, or they miss something, or they're distracted, or maybe because of their experiences, right, and this happens a lot in relationships, you misunderstand really what was communicated. Maybe you're on the defensive. And so it's important to understand, that communication is key to everything, okay? And then communication is important to your career. Ambition and great ideas aren't enough. Okay, you need to be able to communicate with people in order to succeed in business. And everything is be polite, okay? Don't, very interesting, because sometimes a lot of my students have bosses that are their buddies. And so they text like their buddies, hey, whatever, this and that. Don't do that. You put your friends in a very difficult position, and when things go down, you're going to be viewed as, if you're inappropriately communicating, all that's going to come out. So remember that you are representing yourself, and you are your own business, okay? And you are your business card. So the way that you carry yourself, okay, the way you communicate. I have students that are, sometimes very, disrespectful towards me, right? And so, if you're carrying yourself with a higher person, right, or in a professional manner, or even if it's your same colleague, if you're carrying yourself in a very disrespectful way, then that's what your reputation's going to be, okay? And that might create a lot of challenges for you, and that can make you very difficult to work with, okay? And so remember that communication is to be able to really come to a consensus about what needs to be done or what needs to be communicated. So the sender needs to make sure that they're clear, and the receiver needs to understand what it is that the sender wanted to communicate. If there was a misunderstanding, you need to possibly reiterate and say, okay, let me understand that I am understanding that I got this right. This is what you want. And then you mention it to them, okay? And so you have a little diagram here about understanding the foundations of business, transmitting meaning, and then negotiating meaning. And they have little like icons here, okay, in your book. And then you have, you have a recreating of the meaning, right? So it goes back and forth, and that's a little diagram that's there. And then communication is important to your company, okay? It's closer ties with important community and marketplaces. It offers opportunities to influence conversations, perceptions, and trends, all right? It increases productivity and faster problem solver. It's better financial results and higher in for investors. And then early warnings of potential problems from rising business costs to critical safety issues, okay? And then stronger decision making based on timely, reliable information, clear and more persuasive marketing messages, and then greater employer engagement with their work, leading to a higher employee satisfaction and lower employee turnover. Don't talk bad about your boss. Don't talk bad about the business that you're in and the company that's paying you, okay? I had a lot of teachers that used to complain about teaching, and used to complain about the parents, and used to complain about the students, and used to complain about the district. They are the ones that went in and applied. Same with you all. If you're in a position, okay, you went and applied. Even if somebody offered you the position, you still had to go and apply. So you wanted that position, okay? And as I used to tell my teachers, it's your bread and butter. That's what's feeding your family. That's what's feeding you. So don't bite the hand that feeds you. It's stupid, okay? If you don't like your position, if you don't like your boss, you think your boss is stupid, your boss isn't that stupid if they're higher than you. When you get to be a boss, then you can do whatever it is that you want, and you're going to see and you're going to understand at that point why it is that your boss did whatever it is that they did. And if they are a bad boss, then you learn from good bosses and you learn from bad bosses, okay? So it's important for you to not talk bad about people and just work with them. You're there to pay you're there to get paid, okay? And so that's what you're there, you get paid to work. And so that's what you're there for. So that's what you do, whether you think it's appropriate or not. If you think it's incorrect or there's something wrong or whatever, mention it. Hey, you know what? I think that if we do this way, or I think that if I do that, then that's going to happen. That's going to, maybe, I don't know. You don't want to kill anybody because you guys are in medical, but, I think that maybe that's not the best way to do it, or won't that have that kind of side effect? And once you bring it up and they say, do it anyway, then if anything happens, it's on them. So it's protecting yourself as well, okay? So if you don't like your job, look for another one, okay? But always finish up with a bang, because you never know you never know. Life is crazy, okay? And so maybe the boss that you told off later on, you 20 years later, and then you meet up with them somewhere else, and they're not going to forget what you've done, okay? So close out as best as you can the cycles of work, because you just never know, okay? I had one of my assistants, didn't get along with this person or whatever. When they were back in high school, she ended up being her boss, okay? So be mindful. And then what makes a business communication effective? Provide practical information, give facts rather than vague impressions, present information in concise, effective manner, clarify expectations and responsibilities, offer compelling, persuasive arguments and recommendations, and then communicate professionally. I can't stress enough. Say thank you, say please. Make sure that you learn your etiquette for emails. That's huge. Also texting. You're not going to text your boss like you're going to text your homies or your husband or your kids, okay? There are different registers, which are the way that you talk and you speak for different groups. If you're out with your homeboys, you're going to speak very differently if you're in a professional setting, okay? So and professionalism will always keep you safe, okay? You don't want to be talking all hood and stuff like that. That's not the place and time to do it, okay? So maintain communication is an essential part of being successful professional, okay? You've been communicating your entire life, but you don't have a lot of work experience yet. Meeting this expectation of professional development might require some adjustments. For me, my mother is deaf. She was, or hard of hearing. She's not deaf. And I come from a very large family. I have 8 siblings. So we always used to yell at the house because mama was hard of hearing, okay? And we were a lot of kids. And so for me professionally, I had to be able to tone down my volume, okay? Because I didn't understand that that was sort of yelling, but I because of my experience, I was yelling, but I didn't know that I was yelling. So sometimes we need to adjust whatever it is, experiences or the way we communicate, that maybe we've been communicating forever that way, but it's not appropriate in the area, okay? So I had to really adjust that. And as I get excited, I get louder and louder, and that just altercates. It creates an altercation, even though I'm not in an aggressive mode. It's just the way it is. So I have to temper myself down. It was a huge lesson for me. So you need to be conscientious about how it is that you communicate and understand whether your communication is being effective or not, because that's the bottom line. There's also here a professional communication in digital social media, right? It says elements of professionalism, figure 1.3. You have here, be the best, be ethical, be clear, be respectful, be a team player, and be independent. Be dependable, okay? There's nothing like being dependable. You have to be dependable, okay? So it tells you there, understanding what employees expect. They expect, recognizing information needs, using effective search techniques to locate reliable sources, organizing ideas and information logically and completely, expressing ideas and information coherently and persuasively, actively listening to others, communicating effectively with people from diverse backgrounds and experiences, using communication technologically, effectively and efficiently, and then following accepted standards of grammar, okay? This is very important because the way we text, because it used to be, I don't know, now we have our iPhones, right, or our Androids, but before they used to be the little, clicks or whatever, the dials, right? And so, it was ABC for one, and then CDE or whatever. So what happened, and it's very interesting, is that everybody started creating because of the need of being able to text, because we didn't have an iPhone or an Android, and we had those, the ones that you pressed, right? There was a need to create a faster and quicker way of grammar. So there was a lot of make-believe abbreviations that did not correspond to appropriate grammar and were not appropriate and were not correct. But because of the need to not express yourself and not spell everything out, because you had to go to each number, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you'd hit C and then whatever. And so it created a huge delay. So people started cutting back and creating some sort of abbreviation. And now it's accepted because that's the way we text, because that's the way we were, and because of the platform and the mode and the modality of the communication, okay? But that doesn't mean that you can text or you can use that type of grammar within your, email, right? Or within a formal letter. So be mindful, because, I always text, PLSE, right, for please. But when I'm writing a formal letter, right, or an email, I've caught myself that I put that abbreviation, which really doesn't exist, okay? But I need to make sure that spell it out. So make sure that the communication and the appropriate grammar is appropriate for the modality and the platform and the social media that you are using, because it is different. Like when you're conversing, as I told you, you have different registers. You're not going to be speaking to your teacher the way you speak to your child, okay? So make sure that you understand the grammar implications. And let me take a significant time on this, okay? I'm trying to keep this to 20 minutes. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen. When you have poor grammar, all right, the message that it is sending out is that your level of education is lower, and that you do not know how to communicate and you did not learn how to write. And that's what that is coming towards, okay? The higher vocabulary and the higher ability of being able to grammatically structure appropriate written language is huge, and it says huge things about you. It can determine what level of education you have. It can determine your culture. It can determine your social economic status. It can determine the level of society, society that you're in, okay? And it can determine the background that you have had. So be mindful of that, because it could really put in a damper, okay? I've met very, very important people, and they speak horrendous or they write horrendous, and I'm like, oh my God, okay? So be mindful of that. Communicating in an organizational context, formal, informal, that's exactly what we've been discussing. And then the audience-centered approach. If we were to be in a regular classroom and we were physical, you would have to do presentations. When you do presentations in class, everybody thinks that your audience is your teacher and is your classmates. That is an incorrect assumption. Your audience is your teacher. Your teacher is the one that's giving you the grade. Unless you have a class where your colleagues are going to be and your classmates are going to be giving you a grade, they are not your audience. Your audience is the person that gives you instructions, the person that you're presenting to. And even though the audience and everybody's there, the people that matters, or the person that matters, is your teacher, because they are the one that set the assignments, and they're the ones that are going to give you instructions, and they're the ones that are going to see that meet your requirement. So for me, right, if I was speaking to my students, I would speak to them very differently than if I had a meeting with the parents, okay, or the PTO. Or I would speak to the PTO very differently from, the parents than I would my teachers. Why? Because my teachers knew what we were doing, and they had a different vocabulary, because every technical and every profession and every career has their own vocabulary. When I first got into Southwest, I don't have a medical background. So it was like learning a new language. When people would say, I'm going to go do vitals, I had no idea what that is, right? And so it depends. Just because you're very highly educated, or that doesn't mean that you're going to know the vocabulary from another area of career, or another profession, or another job, okay? And then you have your professional communication. You have here your etiquette. What is your etiquette? And it talks about, the expected norms of behavior in a particular situation can have a profound influence on your company's success and career, okay? How is it that if you're just, here, give me this, or if you say good morning, thank you so much, regards, if they send you an email and you don't have time or you don't want to respond yet, okay, you can say, thank you so much for the email, or received, I don't have the appropriate data. I will be looking into it, and we'll get back to you as soon as I can, or as soon as I acquire the data. So there has to be proper etiquette. If you're partying, okay, for like Christmas parties, and you go get plastered because they're giving free drinks or whatever, you need to be very careful, because when you're plastered that day, that's going to be an image that's going to change tremendously once you get back to work. And let me tell you, I was an assistant principal in one of my classes, in one of my schools. And there was this teacher that, she was very young at the time, and she got completely plastered in our Christmas lunch, okay? For me, I would always go to lunch and leave immediately, everything. The conferences, I wouldn't intermingle with anybody. Maybe I was a little harsh and a little prude, and I'm thinking that maybe I should have been a little bit more flexible. But I'm glad that I was very conservative and very strict with what I did and who I hung out with. I wouldn't go out drinking, especially when we're in education, so I was viewed very, very badly. So back to this girl, back to this teacher, right? So we went to a luncheon, a Christmas lunch. We're teachers. We don't even have alcohol around us ever, okay? Our parties are in the gym with flat Coke, okay? And if you're lucky, you get Rudy's, all right? So that's the kind of culture that we're coming from, because it's school, right? And everyone within the school environment speaks and addresses everyone by their last name, by their surname, and depending on your marital status, right, you're either Miss, Mrs., or Miss, right, or you're a Mr., okay? So I always reference my assistants, and everybody always referenced me as Miss Servin, and that's why I have everything Miss Servin, because that's how I am. So back to the story. So this girl completely got super plastered. She fell. She couldn't even stand up. Okay, there was some colleagues there trying to have her stand up. I've never been able to erase that image from me, because she was standing up against the wall and she slipped under a table. We were in a Mexican restaurant. So fast forward, I, become a principal, and she's there, and she's one of my best teachers. But every time I look at her, all I could think about was when she was sliding under the table, okay? So be mindful, and remember, words and images stay forever. So be mindful what kind of words and what kind of images you want to portray and give, okay? So exploring communication processes, the sender has an idea, the sender encodes. We already discussed all that. You can read it yourself. And then noise distractions, right now, like I'm here at home, they're coming and going. It distracts me. So be mindful of that. You can multitask, but I've noticed that when I multitask, sometimes I make errors. So if there's something very specific and very important, make sure that you stick to that, okay? And then competing messages, filters, channel breakdowns, inside the mind of your audience, we already discussed that. You need to decide who it is that your audience is and be able to speak appropriately to that specific audience. If you guys are talking to me in medical terms, you're going to have to understand that I do not have medical background, so you're going to have to explain more, right? So my students started explaining it. Miss, vitals are this, when you draw blood, this happens, phlebotomy means this, and so they've taught me a lot, because when they would discuss things, I had no idea what they were discussing. And then, we discussed about your audience. We already did that. Social communication models, we already discussed in terms of platforms, mobile, the revolution having to do with your phone. It was unbelievable. We also have our watch. The watches are great. You can speak on it. It's like a walkie-talkie, or you can answer your phone on it. It's just unbelievable. You can exchange currency within your phone and the internet and the phones. iPhone, okay, Apple phone, because that's the first phone that really came out that was able to do all the internet and be able to do everything that was able to do. They revolutionized your world, okay? And if you grew up and you already had a phone, you have no idea. Before, we had to be like against the wall with like a string that's attached to cord, and we couldn't move. There was like cordless phones, but once you hit a block, right, you'd leave your house, and within a block, then that was the end of that. Okay, so using technology to improve business, it's all fun and games. Effective business communication, businesses do very well with social media. Actually, I was the first teacher that started using social media as a way to convey our classes. So when COVID hit, I was ready. I converted my channel into a class, all right? So we have all sorts of stuff that can happen. Plagiarism, communicating ethical and legal communication. Be careful. If you're using someone's computer, they have access to that. At school, we had access, the IT department had access to hack into your computer from their main office, so they could access anybody's computer in any school at any time. If they were not able to, they would go in like Mission Impossible or DEA or whatever and just take your computer away, and they could see. I caught teachers like eBaying, okay, during class. I caught teachers doing very inappropriate stuff that they were seeing and watching. So be mindful, okay? Nothing erases, and if you are using anything having to do with the company, especially if they give you a phone or computer, you have to understand that they have access, they have a right to do it. Any type of exchange of communication can be used in a legal setting. So be mindful and be careful what you write. I hardly would write emails, just very important emails. I would hardly ever respond on anything, because anything can be, once you say it, it's there, okay? And once you hit the send button, forget it. So be mindful of that, okay? Because it can get you into very legal issues. Be ethical and be moral. Just do the right thing always, okay? Even if maybe people took advantage of you, or maybe it got, I don't know, maybe, you could have done better if you wouldn't have, been ethical or moral. It goes a long way, okay? And when it goes a long way, that's who you're going to be. And no matter what people say about you, your actions are going to speak for themselves, and your reputation will precede you. So make sure that you understand that. that, you know, your reputation is going to precede you. Like in school, I know who turns in their work, who doesn't, you know, and that sort of is the way it goes, you know, that if you're like that in one class, you're going to be like that, you know, in another class. And so be mindful. This is a practice. And if you guys are veterans or you all have worked or whatever, then, you know, perfect that. Become the professional that you want to see, even if you're in an unprofessional environment. And that's going to keep you safe. It's going to keep you away from legal issues. Okay. And if you follow policies and procedures and you're fully ethical all the time and you're polite and you're, you know, just polite, and politeness goes a long way. All right. So, so we're there, talks about legal issues and all that. So great chapter. Okay. I love business communication. I am in business. Okay. So, so I just absolutely love it. And I had a student that told me, Miss, I just want to be a nurse, and that's fine. Okay. You can be whatever it is that you want to be, but remember that you represent yourself and you are your own business card. Okay. So the way you show up, the way you speak, the way you work, okay, is going to say tons about who you are, where you've been, where you grew up from, what kind of resources you've had, and what you've done and what you haven't had. So I hope this helped. Love and light.